The world will note that the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima.
I'm really happy to have with me tonight my good friend and president of the United Nations Association of Santa Cruz County, Dennis Etler, Ray Glock-Grueneich, and Nancy Glock-Grueneich.
I was 19 years old. It was 1961, and we organized, the American Friends Service Committee and others, organized the first Peace March. We marched from Sunnyvale to Golden Gate Park, 4-day march,
Is that
staying
right?
overnight in churches,
I'll be darned.
probably 100 people protesting nuclear testing.
Yeah.
And whenever there was a nuclear test, I would wear an armband, a black armband, at San Jose State College, where I was a sophomore. And the people organizing it, the Student Peace Union, included one Ray Grueneich. And that's where we met each other 32
kidding.
years before we got married.
I'll
So I just had to slip that,
Please,
slip
yeah,
that
well, we would not have wanted to miss that.
in. I think if I can just add the only other thing on my mind to kind of flip the whole game,
Please.
on the 100th anniversary of what is now called
Armistice?
Veterans Day.
Veterans Day.
Sarah was leading a small discussion group as part of the veterans celebration of the 100th anniversary. And the very last person in the circle to speak was her husband, Danny. And he a bit flippantly said, regarding climate change and how do we do something about it, well, why don't we just put the military to work on it? I have not stopped thinking about that,
that right?
since.
Yeah.
I have since found several serious references to it. I've been thinking a great deal about it. I honestly don't know a way to do what needs to be done as fast as it needs to be done without getting every one of the security forces of the world to assure the security of the human race by bringing their budgets, their personnel, the skills which are especially well suited to the job. We're looking at probably having to rescue 1 billion people over the next 10 or 20 years. Are going to be have to move from where they are living to somewhere else. There's going to be rebuilding, relocation, and building in advance to shift around the infrastructure for us to survive. And so what comes up for me, ironically, the only way we can do it is for all the military forces to devote themselves completely to rescuing each other, which creates security. That is their job.
Right.
And it shifts. That's going to be something called peace that we've never been able to do before. So that's my positive spin on this.
Interesting.
But it's also, let me just say one more
Yeah,
thing.
please.
It's a goal. When we talk about the Green New Deal, which is an American plan, but all the other countries of the world have to be stepping up, one of the demands I want to put on the top of the list, realign, give a different mission, a different directive to our military forces in every country and have them collaborate with each other.
Okay. Well, I have to demur. It's a wonderful vision, but it's not realistic. I'm sorry to say, because we have to come to the realization that the nuclear age was initiated by the U.S. You know, we were the ones that others were trying, particularly the Germans, but we are the ones that developed the bomb and actually used it.
True.
And, the idea that we used it to end the war and save American lives has been shown to be a myth. We used the bomb in order to intimidate the Soviet Union, which at that time did not have a nuclear weapon. We have never disavowed the first use of nuclear weapons, whereas China has, and other nations. I don't know about the British and the French. I don't know. I have to research, the Soviet Union, but I do know that China has disavowed the first use. So we are the ones that developed the weapon. We're the ones that used it. Other nations on the Security Council, understanding that the U.S. was capable of using that weapon to implement their war policy after the war, developed weapons as a matter of national self-defense. You know, that's just the reality of the situation. That's where deterrence comes in. It's not that deterrence was, you know, we don't have nuclear weapons to deter others from using them against us. They have nuclear weapons to deter our use against them. So my argument is that the U.S. military is an imperialist military. It is not ever going to give up the ghost. Right now, we are planning to augment our nuclear arsenal by tenfold, you know, to the tune of trillions of dollars.
You and I aren't disagreeing.
No,
in
no,
any
I'm
way.
not. I'm just looking at you,
wanna
but
be
I'm,
clear.
I'm saying, right. But these things have to be made clear.
Yes.
That, you know, if there's ever going to be, you know, nuclear disarmament on a global scale, the United States has to take the initiative. Other nations will not respond, the nuclear club, so to speak. They will not respond until the U.S. takes the initiative.
Agree.
And under the auspices of the United Nations,
Yes.
under the nuclear ban treaty, which has been passed by 122 nations
Yes.
of the General Assembly,
Yes.
there is a framework. We have to have the wherewithal as a nation to step into the breach, to take the lead. We're the ones that initiated it. We're the ones that have to begin the process of withdrawal. And if that's not made clear, nothing is going to change.
Great.
And that's why what I advocate is a peace policy. And unfortunately, none of the candidates for presidency in the Democratic Party, be they moderates, progressives, democratic socialists, what have you, none of them are talking about a peace policy. They are all talking about sanctions against Russia, sanctions against China, sanctions against Iran. That is economic warfare. That is a part of the hybrid warfare that we are waging against any nation that refuses to, you know, kowtow to the demands of the White House, be it Trump, Obama, or whomever else is going to be sitting there. So we have to talk about a peace plan, and there is a precedent for that. I wrote an article. There is a precedent, and that was the peace policy of Henry Wallace back in the 1940s, who was vice president under FDR. And he was the one, he was totally against the use of nuclear weapons. And what he talked, what we later referred to as détente with the Soviet Union, he wanted to initiate a plan that would lead to not the imperial domination of the U.S. over the world, but the U.S. as the leader in developing the underdeveloped countries, in the leader in the decolonization process, in the leader of economic development, which is a prerequisite for, you know, any sort of implementation of human rights. You can't have human rights unless you can feed your population, house your population, take care of their health and education. Without those prerequisites, all talk of human rights
Peace.
Well, peace is null and void. So that's why we need a peace policy, and nobody's talking about it.
And before we go to Sarah, who I knew is formulating her response over here, I did want to remind folks that Hiroshima Day is going to be August 10th at the Clock Tower. What time is the festivities going to begin? Begin at noon. It's a commemoration of some fallen heroes. You call them peace champions, I believe.
Yeah.
Wonderful, really legacy here in Santa Cruz. But I just want to remind folks of that. But Sarah, you were making a couple of notes over there, I noticed. So you have a response, perhaps, that you could share with us?
Yes, when we were doing Silkwood, when we won that case against the current, now I want to point out that fossil fuel and nuclear are very often the same companies. The Kerr-McGee company, which was where Karen Silkwood worked, is a fossil fuel oil company as well as a nuclear company. Right. This is something helpful to remember.
Yes.
So when that case was won, I'm happy to say through the work of like 50 people who were all over it, it stopped all ordering of new nuclear plants. So there haven't been any new plants ordered and built since 1979. So that's a strategic move. The idea here is to think strategically. What do we need to do strategically to shift things, all right? So now, in my opinion, firm opinion, and the Romero Institute is working on this, it's the Green New Deal. Why? Because climate trumps everything now. And if you can address climate strategically and effectively, you can address all the things that everybody's talking about.
Exactly.
You can address all the things that everybody's talking about because they can be part of the shift into a new era.
All right.
So the coin, it's like the Chinese coin. One side is crisis, the other side is opportunity. We have this moment in time where if we don't come up with something really visionary and really practical at the same time, we're going into extinction. We're actually, some species are already going rapidly now. So we have a motivation that is different than any other time that we've ever done anything, right? So the only thing on the table, as far as we're concerned, that we can see that has a chance of doing this is the Green New Deal. It could get lost in Washington, so we're working on actually drafting the legislation, we're 400 pages into it, for a California Green New Deal. Because California has the best environmental laws in the country, and if it puts a Green New Deal together and passes it, it could lead other states, it could lead the nation, it could lead the world.
I mean, in a larger sense, are we moving toward, are we moving away from nuclear generated power into alternative energy sources?
That's what we need to do.
Because I've heard that nuclear power has a degree of safety, even though
they're trying.
People,
they're trying, but it's not going to work.
Okay.
It's
so
so
I want to know more
expensive.
about that.
It's so expensive, it's
Yeah.
unbelievably expensive, and it's so toxic with the waste, and they have no solution to the
Okay.
waste.
Right.
They have no solution to the waste, no matter what they say. So it's dead. It's dead as a source of power for the future, no matter what they say. I've talked to other nuclear people who are still very active in this field. We've moved on to other things. We did the Silkwood case, but then we wanted to do Iran-Contra and other things. But the nuclear experts that I know all say it's dead, but the waste is there, and the industry is still trying to figure out how to. But it's so expensive, and what happened with Silkwood is what we won was this precedent that said they're strictly liable. Strictly means really liable, really a lot of money liable, for the contamination that comes from these places, and it makes it too expensive for the insurance companies to insure them.
But you can't reduce the dependence on nuclear power without a concomitant increase in alternative energy sources. Are we moving closer to actually being able to provide a significant percentage of our energy through alternative energy sources rather than relying on nuclear power? That would be my question.
I think what's happening is we're moving natural gas plus hydroelectric plus wind plus solar. It's a combination of things plus conservation. We can get there, but we cannot get there with nuclear. I mean, they want to say that we can, but it's just another death trip. It's another death trip, and it's another huge tax trough. Just huge amounts of money to try to make it work.
No, I don't doubt that. Ray, you had a
I want to pick up on a term that Dennis introduced, the word realistic. And this concept of realism,
which we don't subscribe to here at Voices from the Village, by the way. But go ahead.
I think actually we do, and we need to. It's a fallacy to allow the word realism to be owned by those who are currently in power. If we allow ourselves to say that is realistic, that the only things that are realistic are what the current span of power, including even, I mean, to take even the, as Dennis pointed out, the spectrum of Democratic presidential candidates. They are, if you limit your concept of realism to what those who are in power, or even who imminently aspire to power, are willing to adopt, that does not mean that it's going to be realistic in the functional sense. If all of their solutions lead to the extermination of the human race, that is not realistic for us. So we have to go ahead and define realism, not in terms of what is politically acceptable to those in power, but what is really going to reach us to a point where we can do it. And so I agree with Dennis about how we have to expand our sense, and as well as this was implicit in what Nancy and what Sarah have been saying, we have to go and figure out what is it that we must do. We must be strategic about how to get there, and how do we possibly transform first of all, our thinking about what is necessary, and then to sort out if it's necessary, is it possible? And I want to give an Irish joke that make a serious point with it. The Irish focus asked, how do you get to there? And the answer was, well, if I was to go there, I wouldn't want to start from here. But the problem is, we have no choice but to start from here, but we still need to get to there, and there should be at least human survival with a life that is worth living. And the here are a bunch of politicians and power mongers who are saying that's not okay.
Thank you, Ray.
No, I couldn't agree more. If I did use the term realism, what I meant is that we have to be realistic in our assessment of what needs to be done.
Absolutely.
And what needs to really be done is, as I said, and I'll just reiterate, a real peace policy, which means the dismantling of the military-industrial complex and the dismantling of the surveillance state and the repurposing of our industrial base to the Green New Deal and to building our infrastructure, rather than spending trillions upon trillions of dollars on needless wars that only, fill the coffers of the armaments industry.
Right.
The Boeings and the others who, are spending trillions of, how much the F-35, which is a total fiasco, is going to cost this nation $1.5 trillion.
It would pay for all student loans with money left over.
Right. And I mean, $1.5 trillion for the
let's not get lost in the
just to go on, and then of course another trillion or more for building a new generation of nuclear weapons.
A trillion here, a trillion there.
Money spent on wars overseas. I mean, it's not that we don't have the money. It's the total misallocation.
Let me interrupt you just for a second. Let me ask Sarah, because I think you're closer to it than I am, and perhaps the rest of the panel. What's the realistic probability or possibility that we can adopt a Green New Deal? Is there realism in that?
Yes. We have one team that's working on developing a regional one for our region in the same region where we worked on Monterey Bay Community Power.
And congratulations on that. Wonderful.
Yeah, that was really great because it's
terrific
$1 billion
success.
Pounds of carbon not going up every single year.
No.
So, because we want to prove that it can be done in a region, and we want the region to identify what the state needs to do, and we're doing it here. It's the first region as far as we know. However, these climate action plans are happening in cities like San Diego. LA has a great one. They have to implement it, but they have a great one. So the cities are all supposed to be doing these climate action plans. But what we're saying is you can only do so much at the city level, and the rest has got to be done at the state level. But we're working from the ground up as well as writing the bill from the top down, and then we're going to meet in the middle, and we believe it can be done. But the point I wanted to add to what people are saying is that we have a moral problem. We can say we want peace, but we have a situation where there's a very powerful element in our society and our economy, led really by the fossil fuel industry now at this stage of the game, that is so committed to the greed kind of ethic of rape and pillage the planet for profits, and that's what you do. That's the way it is, and we'll survive ourselves. Those of us who are doing this, because we'll have all the money and power, and we'll be. And they don't care what happens to the rest of the people. So that's a moral problem. Because if you value everyone on the planet, all human beings, you value life itself, the animals, the birds, the insects, all of this, which is this great, amazing, exquisite biological diversity that you don't see much out there in Mars or these other places. I'm sure there are plenty of them out there, but they're not the norm.
Right.
So here we have this. We're supposed to be stewards of this. We're supposed to appreciate the fact that all the abundance is here for us to live if we don't destroy it ourselves. Now we've got an element of people making a big error, and then we're supporting with our cars and everything because we haven't figured out yet that we got to stop. This is a moral question. Who's going to decide how the future looks? Harvard has been having a class on climate for at least 2 decades. It's about migration. It's about the millions and millions and millions of people who will be moving away from the coast, because 62 or 3% of the people live on the coast in the world. The people moving from droughts and from the loss of their lakes and everything. So, and law and order. This class is all about how do we maintain law and order, and how do we deal with the fights over water and land and all of this. And the military has been putting out videos for a couple decades about how chaotic and crazy it's going to be, and law and order problems and all this. Neither Harvard, or at least unless they've changed lately, or the military are talking about how to solve things in a positive new paradigm way, where it's peaceful, where it's harmonic, where it's respectful of all the human beings, and we all do it together because we're all part of the human family. We're not just Americans or Russians or this or that.
And I think that's true. I think we can all agree here that we honor the sanctity of human life, but the greater question is, I think, is how do we preserve it? You preserve it through climate, you preserve it through peace, you preserve it through non-proliferation of nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
How do you do that? How does this table
But what I'm saying
approach
is
that problem?
the Green New Deal is a place where you can draft it all.
And it goes back to my question about how realistic that is to adopt a Green New Deal, and I would love to see that happen. I know, for instance, I think you're better really building from the top to the bottom, because we do have a climate action plan here in Santa Cruz that we developed years ago, but it's really nothing more than about a 220-item wish list. We haven't done anything with it.
I know. We're aware.
So, I'm sure you're aware of that.
We're aware.
So
Meetings are all
there
happening.
must be better ways to really to serve that agenda.
Well, here's the thing. Look, we only have 10 years to turn the corner on climate. We only have 10 years.
Unless we blow ourselves up with nuclear weapons.
We're not likely to do that in the next 10 years. If so we have to do it. And what makes it different than anything else is it may wake some people up that are on the other side of this struggle for the resources of this country and the direction of this country, because it is so serious. It is so serious, and Mother Nature is going to continue to hammer away so that more and more people wake up. I mean, there were 500 tornadoes in Oklahoma in 1 month. We just had 200 billion tons of ice melt and go into the ocean from Greenland in the month of July. It was the hottest month in the history of humanity. Everything keeps happening, and it's rapidly, it's going faster. So we have this wake-up thing happening. We're trying to get ready with a plan that would actually help that corner get turned in 10 years. All human beings can do right now is work on whatever positive thing they think either can help now or in a couple of years. But that's it.
Ray, Dennis, what's your wake-up call to action
Okay,
in that respect?
I couldn't agree more with everything that's being said, of course. I just would like to add one thing. There's a phrase, a common destiny for all humankind.
Yes, that sounds good.
And this is the key stone of the policy of Xi Jinping in China. If you actually read what Xi Jinping says in his speeches, not what's reported in the Western media.
Yes.
He wants to see, what you're talking about.
Interesting.
And people need to really understand that there are other forces in the world that are working towards that goal. I mean, people might say, that's just rhetoric. But, wouldn't it be nice if we had a president in the White House
Absolutely.
that used that kind of language. Language has meaning.
It does.
And when you speak about a common destiny for all human, this is a slogan that you can see emblazoned throughout China. A common destiny for all humankind, which means that we have to all work together. Whatever differences we may have in terms of our economic policy, our political structure.
We have about 5 minutes left, and so we all have a common destiny that the show is going to end in a few minutes. But we got about a minute each for you to sum up, so please bear that in mind. Nancy, you want to?
Well, I want to reclaim realism. As you know, we lived in China the last few years. They're very committed to peace for 2,000 years. That's what it means to be great in China. The reality that we are up against of 1 billion people needing to be rescued over the next 10 to 20 years, that is not going to go away. In the short run, we're not going to get the changes in policy. But over that period of time, we're going to have emergency actions, which then lays the groundwork for the longer term stuff that you're talking about. That's our livable future. But right now we have an emergency notion of what realism looks like that can in fact get us there.
Ray, your minute to sum up.
I want to just sum up, but I want to use another metaphor here.
We'll do it in a minute.
Yes, the metaphor of intoxication.
Use whatever metaphors you want.
We are involved with the intoxication of greed in this nation, and we have exported it to most of the world. And I want to make a comment about Xi Jinping.
You may not have time. Very briefly.
China was among the nations that was very much plagued by alcoholism at leadership level. On his first day in office, Xi Jinping banned alcohol from party and government meetings. Earlier they got drunk first and then they made decisions. So we need to do the same thing here to get over our intoxication with greed. That should not be the way policy decisions start.
Very good. Sarah, your minute.
What I would say is that we at the Romero Institute believe that the people now really have to make stuff happen.
Yes.
It's not that we don't have great politicians. We do have some very good people, particularly in our area. We have some good people, and it's not that China doesn't have good people, or Russia, or Europe, or whatever. But the politicians, we've been in the hands of the politicians in industry now for 40 years on climate, and look where we're at.
Yeah.
We are 10 years away from turning the corner into chaos. So our feeling is we got to write the Green New Deal. We got to have confidence. Yeah. We're just human beings. Everybody's just human beings. People have to step up, do whatever they can figure out how to do. Yeah. And then we have to lead, and then we have to tell the politicians, you do it or you don't get elected. Because that's what really, really, really matters to them. Yeah. And with China, God bless them, because they're going to have all these electric cars soon, but they've got to shut down their coal plants.
Yep, well and passionately said. Thank you. Dennis, you have the last minute on the program.
Okay, well, there's so many issues that need to be addressed when it comes to nuclear power, nuclear armaments. We mentioned about the nuclear armaments that being renovated and modernized. We talked about nuclear power and how detrimental that can be to the environment. And one thing that wasn't mentioned that I think really needs to be highlighted, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a story in the press about the Marshall Islands, where
Dennis, we don't have time, just briefly.
Okay, where nuclear tests had taken place back in the 50s. There is more nuclear contamination in the Marshall Islands, 10 to 100 times that in Fukushima.
It lasts for thousands of years.
Yeah. So just a cautionary tale. This is going to be with us forever.
Thank you, everyone. This has been a fantastic hour. Once again, Hiroshima Day is going to be Saturday, August 10, starting at noon at the Clock Tower.
Yes.
Please be there and honor our peace champions, and just come and have a remembrance with all of us. Sarah Nelson, wonderful to see you again. Thank you for the great work yourself and Daniel at the Romero Institute. We appreciate that. Ray, wonderful to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for being here. Nancy Glock-Grueneich, good to see you, and thank you for all the wonderful work you did with the Matilda and that series that you finished some time back, and people can see hopefully again and again here on community television. I have run it. And Dennis, president of the United Nations Association of Santa Cruz County, and doing great work for the group. We appreciate it as a member of the board. We appreciate your efforts, and particularly with keeping the flame bright and burning for Hiroshima Day. We appreciate that. And thanks everyone for tuning in. This has been Voices from the Village. I've been Steve Plaich. Tune us in again a couple of weeks from now when we have another show going on, and we will see you then. So good night and be well.